This is it, brewers, the last leg of our journey into Czech lager. We brought all our knowledge back from Czechsky Budvar and Budvar. Now we're going to put it to the test and see if we can brew something like the real thing. Stick around to see how we got on, and hopefully you'll feel inspired to brew your own version of this classic beer.
So the purpose of this video is, as Martin said, a culmination of everything we've learned in a recipe, and we're going to show you exactly how we're going to go about brewing this so that you can have a go using our recipe kit and all of the instructions we've put together at home. There's one other thing, isn't there? We've got a guest coming here today.
Yeah, we can't do this without having someone here to help. And there's no one better than having Radim from Budvar come and help us do this brew. Hi Radim, welcome to Malt HQ. So good to have you here again and to get to spend more time with you. Cannot thank you enough for taking us to the Czech Republic, immersing us in the Czech beer culture, showing us around the brewery and just seeing the techniques and what goes on there and getting time to spend with Adam. Everything we're doing today on our recipe is inspired by the 5 points that Adam told us about when we sat down with him. On the ingredients, we are going with Weirmann Bohemian Pilsner.
So the Weirmann Bohemian Pilsner is quite essential because it has a lower number of Goldbach index, which means the modification. Essentially, it means that it's really good for decoction mashing.
And for the hops, we're going to use whole leaf Saaz, just like you guys use.
Yeah, whole corn Saaz. That's something that really defines the Czech lager.
Yeah, except we don't need an axe to break them up because we've got them packed up downstairs in the chiller. So yeast, we're going to use White Labs 802, which is going to be built up with a good starter to give us a healthy amount of yeast cells.
That's a great thing because this is actually our in-house yeast strain.
Fantastic. So we should get as close as possible with that then. And with our water, we've used RO water and we've built it up into a Czech lager profile.
So very low minerality, with a quite soft water, super essential for Czech lagers.
Yeah, so as close as we can get to the water you guys take out the well.
Okay, Martin, so please talk me through how you can replicate the double decoction on a homebrew scale.
Right, first thing, notes. Make sure you have a schedule, you know what you're doing, because it can get complicated. Make sure you've got all your equipment clean, you've got your water ready. What we are going to be using today, this is what I've chosen to use, but it's by no means the only way you can do this. This is just the way I've chosen to do this.
So what are you using?
I'm using a Grainfather G40, 25 litre kettle on an induction hob, and a Grainfather sparge water heater, which we have here for our brew school.
So what's the process?
So the different thing that I'm going to be doing today is, most people would normally have this as their main vessel, which would hold that kind of constant temperature. Then they take a section of it away and do the steps in here and reach the boil. I'm going to actually start off with 50-50 in here in terms of grain. And I'm going to actually do all of the complicated steps with the Grainfather because I can program the controller to do all of those steps and to manage the temperature that it needs to do and hold those steps. Whereas this will be much easier to maintain at a constant temperature. Then once we've done the first decoction, I'm going to tip all of that back into the Grainfather. Then we're going to actually let it rest for a little while. Use the chiller to bring it down to that 65 we want it to rest at. And then we're going to, after it's had its rest, take a portion of this back out, maintain it at its constant temperature there.
On the next step.
And then we'll do, again, the complicated steps of going to 75 and 99 again, back in the Grainfather, until that's done, and then we'll combine all of the mash back together, and then we will sparge it like we would a normal brew day.
Because it's quite essential to keep the temperatures.
Yeah, and with this has got 2 temperature readings in there, so it's calculating what it needs to be heating at to hold it at that temperature.
So it's very precise.
Yeah. But again, you could do this with 2 kettles, 2 induction hobs. You could do it with 2 of these. The equipment is irrelevant. The most important thing here is having notes, being prepared, adapting as it goes. So you're going to have to eyeball basically the mash thickness, take temperature readings, again with a firmer pen, just to make sure everything is exactly where you need it to be. So that's the first 2 of Adam's bits of advice covered.
I'm super excited to see what's going to happen, so let's do it.
So Radim, that is the mash over. Let's just kind of run through the steps and what we did with each vessel. So we used this as almost the main vessel, and we started off at 38 for 20 minutes. What's happening at that stage?
So at the 38 degrees, what happens, it's called a beta-glucanase rest. So that's an enzyme that actually breaks down the gums. The gums, if you leave them in the mash, what it could cause is that it causes a stuck mash. And also, if you leave it go over into the boil and it goes into the fermenter, it could cause haze in the beer. So we want to break that down.
So after that, then we raised it to 50, and it kind of remained there while we did everything in here. What's happening at 50 in there?
So 50 to 55, it's called the proteinase rest. And what it does is actually it takes the protein and breaks it down into large, medium, and small proteins. Those proteins, what it does is aids the head retention, but also adds to the body, adds to the mouthfeel of the beer.
Okay, so then in the G40, we did the more complicated steps. And actually, you helped before we actually started. We edited some of these because of suggestions you made. So we mashed in at 38, and it was kind of there for about 10 minutes, just like the main kettle. Then we went to 65, but only to 5 minutes.
Yeah, so basically at the beginning, at the first decoction, or the first step of the decoction, we really want to skip that beta amylase rest. The reason for that the starches are quite massive, quite big, but we want to skip that beta amylase simply because the alpha amylase that is at a higher temperature, it breaks it down into more accessible starches for the beta amylase to pick it up in the next step, in the second step or second decoction.
So that's when we raised it to 75. So actually we could almost cut out that 65.
We could definitely even skip that step to make it, because we want to aim for the sugar. We want to make it as much fermentable as possible. And the beta amylase, the range is between 55 to 65. It actually breaks it down into glucose, maltose, and maltose. And those are the sugars that the yeast actually want to convert into alcohol.
Okay, so then we went to the 75 and we were there for 15 minutes.
Yeah, so the 75, that's where the alpha amylase is most active. So the alpha amylase range is between like 68 to 75, and what it does, it breaks the starches into less complex starches. Also what it does, it creates dextrins, and dextrins are unfermentable sugars that will stay in the wort, and the yeast cannot munch on it or cannot convert it into alcohol. It needs to stay in a beer to actually create the body. So we talk about recipe making. Usually the ratio would be somewhere like 75 of fermentable sugars and 25 of the unfermentable sugars. So if you look at a hydrometer as the final readings, you would want to be somewhere between 1006 to 10012, and that's the residue sugar that you want to have there that actually creates the body and the mouthfeel of the beer.
So then we go up to 99/100, which is boiling the mash. What's happening there?
First thing, it's really important to keep it there between 10 and 20 minutes. And what it does in that 10 to 20 minutes, two most important things. The starches, they burst. So we actually get more accessible starches for the enzymes to convert into sugars and dextrins. But also what happens, it's sort of a reaction, it's called Maillard reaction. So as we're heating up, it gets a little bit of the breadiness, the bready notes into beer that are very familiar with the Czech lagers. And that's the Maillard reaction. So that's the basic reaction between the sugars and amino acids in it, and then we need to bring it down. We really cannot hold it there more than 20 minutes, otherwise we get that burnt flavor, which we don't want to.
So then we take it down to 65, and we kind of tried to do that by mixing the two volumes into the larger kettle. We hadn't quite got our ratios right, so we used our chiller to also bring it down to 65. What's happening at 65 though?
So at 65, the enzyme called beta amylase that actually takes those starches or chops the starches and creates the glucose, the maltose and maltose. Those are the fermentable sugars. It's quite important to have it around the 65 because that's the highest from the range that the beta amylase is working at. If you go a little bit higher, we actually denature those enzymes, and we actually really need those enzymes. So if the temperature gets quite higher, we really need to bring it down to the range. Even like as we did, we used the cooler just to bring it down to that range of the 65 degrees as soon as possible.
Okay, so then, Radim, we go on to the second decoction, which is basically we scoop back out the mash and some liquor into the kettle. Roughly, we put around about 12.5 litres into there, and that then sat there at 65.
65, yeah. So at that 65, so we're still having those beta amylase enzymes breaking out the starches into maltose, maltose, a little bit of glucose as well. In the meantime, we're bringing to second boil. So we bring it to from 65 into decoction kettle. So from 65 to 75, we hold it there 10 to 15 minutes again, and then we bring it to boil again. So again, it goes through the same process. It chops down more of the starches into more accessible starches, and we're also getting again the Maillard reaction. Throughout the double decoction, there is a few points to achieve. Yeah, so the whole point of doing a decoction is to actually increase the quality of the wort and also increase that yield of it as well. So by boiling that portion of wort, what we do, we actually, the starches capsules that burst, so we more expose them for the enzymes to convert it into sugars, unfermentable and fermentable. As we boiling it up, we bring it in Maillard direction, which is basically the bread in as we get it in beer. Third thing is the color formation. Yeah, so we're starting with the pale malt, and as you know, Czech lagers could be kind of a really gold or nearly amber. So thanks to boiling the wort, we bring the color into it as well.
The other thing that we noticed when we were in the breweries is they've got mastered all of these different times and different temperatures to give that kind of consistency across the batches, and regardless of the ingredients, I think, isn't it?
You know, each year you're having different harvest of malt or barley, later on malt, and what the decoction does is also unifies it, makes the product same all the time.
So it's almost stretching the bandwidth of what your variables can be.
Exactly.
So that then it still tastes the same. But the other thing that I also found fascinating in the brewery was it was a very thin mash, but the way they were hot side oxidizing it as well.
Yes.
To add to the color.
So in the brewery, depending on the color of the malt that we receive, what we actually do, if it's too pale, we can increase the color by actually oxidizing it. So we would send it into decoction tan under pressure and let it literally like get aerated. That increases the color. Yeah. If the color of the malt is in the specs, we just put it in a decoction kettle from the bottom so it doesn't get aerated. So we can implicate the same in homebrew conditions. Yeah. So hot side aeration, it's not a bad thing if it's controlled, because also we're doing a 90 minutes boil. So any oxygen that gets trapped in also gets boiled out in that 90 minutes.
Right. Now, it just goes to show that the job that Adam and his team are doing in the brewery is such a highly skilled job to perfect that recipe and keep it consistent.
It's been 100 years of evolution. Yeah, so this is, again, something like based on the history, based on the knowledge, and based also on experience. So it's very important for any homebrewer to keep on the brew sheet. Yeah, keep every single detail about the brew day in, so then you can always go back and you always sort of can tweak the recipe, you know, and keep on improving.
We're on to the boil now, so let's get our hops in and finish off the boil.
Let's crack on with that. I'm excited.
So Adam, that's the brew day over. We've chilled the wort, put it into the fermenter, pitched our yeast, our large portion of yeast from the starter. How do you think it went?
It was a very successful brewing day, I would say, and now becomes the most important part of the entire process. As we know, brewers make the wort, yeast makes the beer.
Yeah, so we've just covered off 0.3 of Adam's list.
Exactly, and it's the fermentation. So the fermentation is very essential. So for us, our target is to create great conditions for the yeast to thrive at. We've already mentioned the starter, that's a great point. The aeration of wort, very essential for at the beginning. And then what you would like to achieve is to take the wort down to around 7 degrees, pitch the yeast in, and then let the fermentation happening around 10 degrees. In Czech Republic, we measure the amount of sugar in degrees of Plato. So if you make 10 degrees of Plato as a starting gravity, you would leave it ferment for 10 days. Or in our case, our original is at 12 degrees Plato, so we would like the fermentation to happen for 12 days. After those sort of 12 days, obviously you need to monitor the fermentation. You need to take the samples, just making sure it hits the final gravity. If it does, just leave it for 2 to 3 days. Take the reading again. If the gravity is the same, the beer is fully fermented. What then you would do afterwards is to start slowly bringing down the temperature 1 degree a day. In lager brewing, we don't do any decocted rest, so we don't ramp up the temperature, because actually the yeast, as you're cooling it down, in the lagering period, in the maturation period, the yeast actually starts to clean after itself. So it starts to break down the deacetyl as well in the long maturation.
And that maturation period is?
For us, as a sort of a standard, is 90 days. You're a homebrewer, you like to drink your beer, so it's up to you. I would say 60 days would be at least the benchmark to get through it. Lagering is about low and slow, not rushing out of the door. You really want to have that beautiful product that we're just drinking right now. 2 months at least.
At least 2 months. I think within the whole process of this brew and putting the recipe together and the brew date, I've learned along the way that yes, we can write all the steps down, but actually all these steps are there for you to try and understand and to tweak and to change and make it how you want to drink it. So like you say, yes, 90 days is the one that gives you Budvar, but there are ways you can actually go a little bit sooner, or you could even go longer.
Exactly. Again, you are the brewer, you creating the flavor, it's really up to you. Yeah. But traditionally, the Czech brewing is not about rushing it. Yeah, low and slow, keeping it there, let the yeast to cleanse out itself, let it mature, let it clarify as well, because some of the protein gets into the fermenter. So the longer the maturation, also the protein settles down naturally. So the beer clears itself as well. So it'll be nice and clear, like you can see.
I think it would be a shame to rush it after you've spent so long brewing it, because it isn't a normal quick 5-hour brew day. It's much longer. It's much more attention to detail.
It is, and you know, low and slow, no rush.
It kind of makes me appreciate everything we saw in the brewery and the skill that the team has there to create this beautiful beer, which I'm going to enjoy now.
Well, na zdraví.
Yeah, thank you again for coming here, Radim, and spending some time with us. And hopefully we'll see you in 3 months' time to taste our beer.
Well, I'm looking forward to have the comparison. Cheers.
Hey, Radim, thanks for coming back here.
Thanks for having me back.
Really good to see you. It's been, what, good 3 months or
Yeah,
so?
just around 3 months now.
So we did the brew, fermented the work. It took a little bit longer than the 2 weeks which you guys do, but as you guys say, take your time, patience. We got it to where we wanted it to be, and then we conditioned it for 90 days. And it's in this keg right here.
Well, I'm super excited to see how it worked out for you, and obviously super excited to taste it too.
Well, we've set up 2 LUKR side pour taps so we can have the proper experience.
And I also brought some glasses. Well, Martin, I also got a little surprise for you.
What's that?
I brought a keg of original to compare it side by side.
No pressure then.
Well, no pressure.
Okay, that makes me a little bit nervous. I guess all there is to do though is get on and pour the beer and see what you think of our homebrew version.
Shall we do the honors?
Let's go for it, mate.
I must say, first of all, the color is really close.
I mean, that head as well, it's velvety on both of them.
Beautiful, silky, shiny. That's really what you want when you're serving the beer. But look at this, yeah, they were poured at the same time. It still has the beautiful stable head retention. I'm impressed with the color because we used the Weirmann Bohemian Malt.
Yeah.
And the color is so close. But as I'm saying, that the homebrew version has a little bit of the sulfur, but identical. Well, shall we get into it?
Well, I've already got in, mate. I couldn't wait. I see exactly what you mean. There is that kind of slightly sulfury, more naturalness to it.
Don't forget, the original from a keg is filtered and pasteurized.
Yep.
But this is unfiltered and unpasteurized. So
it's very reminiscent of the stuff we had in the tank and what I've had in one of your tank bars.
Exactly. I feel it's really close. It's really close.
I certainly wouldn't turn down having pints of either.
Well,
just like this. I'm extremely proud of that, I've got to be honest, after everything you've said about the taste of this.
And you should. Like, honestly, making a double decocted Budvar at home is challenging. As long as you follow all the steps that we mentioned, those 5 essential steps, I think you can recreate the good drinking experience of a Czech lager at home. Because I must say I'm quite happy with this. And even though your version is homebrewed, I stand behind it. It's better than most mass-produced lagers that you can get in the pub.
Thank you, I appreciate
that. Well, Martin, you've done a really good job, but I firmly believe that we should test this on some independent taster.
A bit of a blind taste test.
Absolutely, because you know, you and me, we can be biased.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as much as I love Budvar and I love my own version, then definitely there could be some bias in. So I've got a great idea. I know this guy who was one of my inspirations into getting into brewing lager and Czech lager. And actually, he just happens to be calling in today. So let's get him to do a blind taste test and see if he can spot the difference and which he prefers. So this is Lance. He's one of our customers, also known as Doorstep Brewing on Instagram. Lance has a massive fascination with lager from all over the world, and he's been one of my biggest inspirations in terms of getting into brewing lager and understanding Czech lager, understanding side pour taps. So it's absolutely great that we've got him here today to do a taste off between the homebrew Budvar and the real Budvar. Because Lance is a massive Czech beer fan, aren't you, mate?
I try to be, yeah.
And you're also brewing it.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
So, what better way to start? So I've got 2 beers here for you, mate. If you want to choose one to start with, tell me what you think of it.
Lovely clarity, nice sheen on the foam. Got like fresh sort of honeyed aroma. Nice bite from the hops. Straight away you get that hint of caramel and that sort of tang from the slight acidic bite from the yeast, but just that sort of rounding out into like a creaminess. It's hard to describe. I'm terrible at describing beers, but that whole punchiness, and then especially from the Czech hops, you can just tell straight away. Beautiful, very nice.
Description sounds great to me, mate. Makes me want to drink it.
I'm terrible at describing things. I try to not to be. You know. Again, there's a slight haze on that, isn't there? Chilled haze, but again, sort of punchy honey aroma from the malt, I'm assuming. Well, that sort of vibe to it. Again, full on honey, just beautiful. Again, slight bit of punches from the hops, really good, fantastic. Drooling slightly, but yeah, I'd dive back into that for more.
So if you had to kind of pick out,
I think appearance alone, I would say that was the homebrew version, just purely because of the slight haze and maybe just a little bit of chill haze from the hop oils, maybe. But again, I wouldn't say there's too much in flavour-wise between the two. I think they're damn fine examples, but I would say that was the homebrewed one, just purely based on appearance and look, just because of the brightness.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So not in a negative way.
No, far from it. No, it doesn't detract from it in any way, shape or form, because as we know nowadays, many people don't really drink with their eyes. And especially, to be fair, I think it comes down to more maybe an unfiltered side, and I think there's damn sight a little bit more flavour in unfiltered beers anyway. But yeah, fantastic. Really like it.
So side by side,
just purely appearance. Like I say, they both got honey on the aroma, caramel, sweetness in the background of the malts. Really good.
So Adam, tell me what you think.
Well, I firmly believe like this was really good project to work on. Obviously, nailing Czech lager at home is not a simple thing to handle, but I'm really happy with how it actually turned out. I was actually surprised, because I know how much time and energy you spend on it, and it really reflects in the beer.
It's certainly not an easy beer to brew. It takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, but I couldn't have got this far without your help and the support of Budvar UK, taking us to the brewery, showing us around. Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I also hope that, the people, the homebrewers realize that it's much more about lager than just, brewing infusion, because the decoction really brings up the best of the malt.
Well, we can see that with the head of this beer, can't we? Cheers. So, Jim, it's been a while since we made our little trip to Czech Republic.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it? What a journey it's been, though, right? We've learnt so much.
It's been extraordinary, having Radim on board and help us with this, and the team at Budvar, and then to actually visit the brewery, see behind the scenes, have him come here and help us brew our own version of it, and then come and taste it. Yeah, I've been blown away.
Yeah, me too. I don't think we could be any prouder of the work that has gone into this and the end result. Could you?
No, I think it's been fantastic. It's really exciting. It's kind of stepped my brewing of lager up another level.
It has, but I also think that the lessons we've learned along the way are not just applicable to lager brewing. You can take elements of everything we've learned on this journey and apply it to any of your beer styles.
The main things that I've kind of learned is paying attention to the detail. The brewing process in terms of in this style was the double decoction was the important part, but then also time,
Patience, right?
patience, ensuring you've got the best quality ingredients and the best quality yeast in abundance. What this has shown me is that we've not brewed an exact clone of Budvar, but we've brewed a homage to that trip to the Czech Republic, the experience of drinking beer from the tank. And that's kind of what this beer is to me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give up. I'm also going to carry on. I want to nail that decoction down further and keep on brewing beer of this standard.
Where are we off to next?
Got a few ideas, Jim.
Okay.
Probably a little bit closer to home, and maybe one or two further away.
All right.
But just watch and see.
Look forward to it. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.